All right, hello, Honors 410. Hope everyone is doing well. So for today's class, just wanted to start off with a quick preview of where we're heading in the class. So we are reading our final essay from Stephen Moore's The Longer We Were There today, and discussing that, the case for Zakir. And then next time we're going to do a practice workshop. I'm going to post a short piece of fiction. I waffled over what to use, ended up choosing a draft of something I wrote quite some time ago. It eventually did get published. There were some changes to it between then and now, but it's a piece I'm not attached to in any meaningful way, and I will be the first to acknowledge is not perfect. In fact, I would guess I'll probably be more critical of than most of you. But so I'm posting that story in the discussion thread here for us to read for next time. So it's called, I believe, Last Night. So I'm going to invite you to read that for next time, and we're going to have a practice workshop discussion based on that short piece, where we'll practice, giving some positive feedback, but also getting into the critical feedback and just kind of pretending that this is a student from the class, so we can just kind of get a feel for how workshop goes in this kind of environment. And I'll weigh in just to kind of, support what I expect will be overwhelmingly a good kind of constructive response to the piece, but also to correct if I feel like things are going kind of off the rails a little bit, either in, being too complimentary without being critical, or in being, excessively critical or not being very constructive in how that criticism is delivered, or so on and so forth. It's basically just a practice run without any actual students' work or feelings on the line, but it's also going to kind of represent the flow of work moving forward in the class. So I'm giving you this draft for you to read for next time as kind of your homework. So next time our discussion thread will largely be based on discussing that piece, as well as just kind of the workshop process in general. And next class I'll also be posting, I believe it's our first 2 stories from students. So that will be your reading homework for the following Monday, for a week from today. And then we'll have a discussion of those pieces for Monday of next week's class. And then I'll post the following drafts that students have shared for us to read for the following class, and it'll just keep kind of following that workflow. So you're always getting new material to read, you're reading it, and you're discussing the previous class's readings in the discussion thread. If that's a little bit confusing, I understand. It's sort of a more intuitive process when we're in person, but I think we can still make sense of it. And I've done this. This is the 3rd time round I've done now with this in the online format. The first time was sort of an impromptu kind of figuring it out as we went. We switched over to remote learning last spring, just before I was going to host one of these rounds of workshop. And over my summer course, we were able to do it more organically, kind of the way I planned. So those who took my Honors 410 class over the summer, there's a good 2 or 3 or 4 of you, I think, in this class who overlap between that one. It's going to be very, very similar to how that played out. And for those who haven't done it yet, rest assured, at least in my mind, it works. I think it's useful. You get feedback from me still about what to do in terms of getting your revised version of this story or essay together. But you also get feedback from your peers, which I think in some ways can be equally, if not more important, just in terms of getting a range of perspectives. And sometimes students pick up on things that I don't, right? Especially if you're writing from a lens of things that are things that other students are more familiar with than I am, based on the pop culture references you're making, or things like that. Sometimes it can be really helpful to have that student perspective. And I learned from the workshop discussion about things that I might have missed. So in any event, keep an eye on the workshop schedule. Make sure you know when your date is to submit. Again, submit by 11 a.m. on your due date, and then we'll discuss it that following class. So really looking forward to getting into this. And again, you have options available to you. Be sure to look back at that assignment prompt if you haven't yet. But in terms of looking at a story, a creative nonfiction essay, if you want to write from your own experience, but in a more creative or narrative kind of way, or a more critical essay, if you want to do kind of a thesis-driven argument, sort of like you did for your critical essay assignment, that is fair game for this assignment as well. But as long as you're turning in by your due date, in line with the page length requirement, and otherwise just generally kind of meeting the expectations I've laid out, you can expect an A-level score for this assignment. Not necessarily 100%, but an A-level score. The rest of it's kind of up to my discretion. If you're not able to make your deadline, communicate with me. At this point, we just still have 1 open slot to be able to move back if we need to do that. But otherwise, if you have to turn in work late, I will still accept it, and I will still look it over for you, assuming it's not real late, like all the way back to when the revised draft is due. But you will lose the benefit of both the workshop and the automatic high level of grading that comes with that, because I'm kind of rewarding you for going through this process that I know can be kind of vulnerable for some folks, and demands you to put forth what we're kind of expecting is a rough draft. Okay, so I hope all of that mostly makes sense. I'll probably leave a little thread here for discussion of the workshop process as well. Next class, though, we'll focus on talking more about workshopping, and again, have that practice workshop with the piece that I'm giving you. But okay, so moving on, though, I want to talk about the case for Zakir here, the final essay from The Longer We Were There. So starting out on just towards the beginning here, 179 to 180, we get this impression of this person, Zakir, who's no longer basically able to leave his house safely, right? He's basically shut inside. He has to avoid people. And so I'm going to leave it as an open-ended question. It's pretty foundational, I think, to understanding the text. But in case you kind of skimmed over and you kind of missed what was going on, just reread page 179 to 180, and you'll get a pretty clear sense. I don't think Moore is very subtle in how he communicates this, what Zakir's situation is. But just for anyone who's still struggling with that, we'll go ahead and talk about in the discussion thread. What is the threat facing Zakir? Why can't he leave his house? Going on to page 183. We have this very specific definition given for this term of special immigrant visas, right? Let's see, I'm trying to find where it specifically falls in the text here. Shoot, I'm having a hard time finding it now. This is where I need to take more careful notes of where on the page I'm supposed to be looking. Okay, well, let me start. I think this is more or less where it was. The very bottom of page 183, the last paragraph that bleeds on to 184. To me, the problem with special immigrant visas for interpreters occurs at the very premise. The State Department conducts the program as a matter of refugee policy. Zakir is treated like a refugee fleeing political violence, with the added caveat that he served in the vicinity of American soldiers. The approach misses the point completely. Zakir's situation is not a matter of refugee affairs, but of veteran affairs. And he goes on from there. So I'm curious of if we can parse that a little bit more, right? Of what the difference is here, why Moore sort of use this as a military issue as opposed to an immigration issue, and how he sort of separates the two here. I think it's an important and sort of interesting distinction he's drawing. On page 185, the last full paragraph here, Moore writes, I asked Zakir what he wants to do if or when he arrives in the United States, what job he sees himself doing. He tells me he'll do anything. It doesn't matter. Anything. By default, he describes janitorial work. I will clean floors, I will clean houses. Whatever I have to do is okay. And I get what he's saying, but I also think he misunderstood me. I tell him, if you could do anything, what would you do? I mean, like your dream. What is that? He tells me he'll clean floors. Of course I've misunderstood. His dream is getting as far from Kabul as possible. He wants an ordinary life, any job at all in America, and he's not being courteous or humble when he repeats to me that he wants to clean floors. He's trying to need as little from us as possible, trying to make it easy for us to accept him. Zakir wants to assure us that he doesn't have any dream that would supplant our own. And I think that this is just such an interesting paragraph in terms of what it says about Zakir and his situation. And I'm curious about reactions to this, what we all make of Zakir's situation here. And I'm also curious just on a more craft kind of writing level. Moore includes some likes here, right? Where I tell him, if you could do anything, what would you do? I mean, like your dream. That way of writing, that's not the kind of language I feel accustomed to from Moore, right? Because he tends to write on a more almost lyric, really carefully chosen prose level, whereas here he's capturing more of a colloquial insertion like, right? Where we think of that as being something we avoid saying in everyday speech, even though many of us say it in our day-to-day dialogue kind of unconsciously, or we become super conscious of it if it's pointed out to us. But what the effect of Moore using it here in this sort of way that he's sort of capturing a dialogue without actually using the precise dialogue. We don't see dialogue tags for most of this, for a little bit of what Zakir says, but for Moore's part of the conversation in particular, he's not capturing his exact dialogue, but he's still choosing to use those kind of verbal tics. And I'm curious, what we make of that. Okay, and then on page 191, we have this repetition of word choice here. Let's see if I can find where I was looking for there. There's some doubting of sort of the process here that I think Moore is sort of articulating to us. Let's see. Okay, so well, actually, let me come, because 192 gets a little more clearly at what I'm trying to get at here. So he sort of leans more fully into it being an argumentative essay at this point, right? Where I would argue most of this collection is pretty explicitly creative nonfiction, in the sense that he's telling stories. The book is even labeled a memoir of a part-time soldier, in contrast to this is a argument that I'm making, right? But I would argue that the final essay here becomes more an argument of what we should do for Zakir, right? It's pointed in its purpose. He has a target audience here. And so I'm sort of interested in why we think that the Moore kind of chose to end here in the book. There's almost a degree of sarcasm kind of packed in here at various points in the late stages of the essay. And I would argue that there's a sense in which this is where Moore almost finds a nexus point between more creative nonfiction and more critical writing, in giving us a takeaway, right? Some of you might remember, I think I may have even said it to you when we were doing our critical essay assignment in this class, a little bit about using that conclusion space of your essays to point us forward. And there's that classic question that English teachers like to ask, which is the so what, right? So we've read your whole argument, it's well articulated, you've made good use of the text, but so what? How do I apply this to my life? What should this make me think about beyond just the exact framework of reading this essay itself? What sense do I make of this thing? And the case for Zakir almost giving us more so what we can do next, a call to action almost from this essay. So in any event, I'll leave the Moore essay there. I'll leave the whole Moore book there. So I'm really interested in reactions, though, to that structure and some of those other more open-ended questions that I led us to there. And I welcome you to also, as always, take us to different places in this specific essay, and also to the whole book in general. To be transparent with Stephen Moore, he wrote a fair portion of this, at least first drafts of it, in his own graduate school experience when he was getting a Master of the Fine Arts in Creative Writing. And there's a lot of remolding and rewriting and new essays that are written since that time to ultimately compose this book. But I think the impression I get, just from what I understand about Moore, from what I've read in interviews, from what I've heard from him, and just from reading the book multiple times at this point, is he was very careful about choosing the essays to go in here, what order to put them in, and kind of the overarching narrative of this book and what we should take away from it. So I'm curious also to kind of overarching reactions, why we end here, and kind of impressions of this essay and the book on the whole. So, okay, so I'll go ahead and leave it there. So again, in the discussion thread, I'll leave space for just talking about workshop drafts and workshop process. I'll leave space for talking about the case for Zakir and the longer we were there in general. And also with this post, I'll leave that short story for you all to read for next time, just to kind of prepare for workshop and do a practice run of it in our next class discussion. But thanks everyone for watching as always, and I'll catch you next time.